Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We will get started momentarily as the room is filled with attendees. Please use the Zoom chat option below to let us know where you're joining us from, because I know we have quite a few different participants from all over the state of Florida. So please let us know where you are joining from. Broward County. See, Donna is joining us today. Hillsborough County, Tallahassee, Florida. Lake County, just a few, quite wide range of variety of folks here joining from all over the state. Pinellas County representing West Palm Beach. We have St. John's in the building. Okay. Who else? Do we have anyone from the Panhandle here? Boca, Lee County, Duval, DeLand, Florida. Okay, quite a few so far. So again, if you're just not joining us and you missed my previous introduction, thank you all for joining. We will begin in just a moment. As the room is filled with attendees, we are asking participants to please let us know where you're joining us from in respect to your county extension office. So far, we have quite a wide range of participants from all over the state. We are looking for a little bit more representation from the Panhandle, if we may. So hopefully someone let us know that they're representing for the Panhandle. We have South Florida, Central Florida, North Florida, Madison County, but specifically, let's see if we have participants from the Panhandle. The Panhandle is always one of the areas that we struggle to have representation from. However, I am very, very hopeful. It is now 10:02. We will begin in just a minute or two. We're just giving the participants a few more minutes just to join. In the meantime, please utilize the chat option to let us know where you are joining us from. Quite a few agents joining us from Broward County, Miami-Dade County as well, St. John's representing, Salt Lake City, Utah, We have some participants from outside of the state of Florida, so that is lovely. That's fantastic. And if I miss your county, I apologize. They're just coming in so rapid that I do not have time to specify in all of them, just a few. So again, we will begin in just maybe one more minute. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us. Again, please utilize the chat option to let us know where you are joining us from this morning in respect to your county. We do have some participants that is outside of the state as well. So please let us know if you are one of those folks who are joining us from outside the state of Florida. We have quite a range of folks this morning. Our participant list has exceeded 100 participants, and we are expecting a little bit more. But for the sake of respecting everyone's time, and for the sake of respecting the presenter's time today, we will begin now. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Professional Webinar Series. My name is Mark Celestin, and I am the training coordinator for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. We are excited to host you this morning. Your microphones have been muted. We will be closing the chat feature during the presentation, so please utilize that chat feature now to let us know where you are joining us from if you haven't already done so. Once the chat feature is closed, please put your questions into the Q&A box, and we will take them at the end of the presentation. So Jen Marvin will take over from that at that point. This webinar is approved for one FFLCP, LIAF, FDAX, DBPR, and FNGLA CEUs. Please note that the one ISA and CAM CEU is still pending approval. So please be mindful, and thank you all for your patience if you're seeking ISA and CAM or CAM CEUs. There is a $15 administration fee to receive Certificate of Continuing Education, CEUs. We will put a link in the chat box to make payments for the certificate if you have not already done so. You'll also see a survey invitation pop up at the end. Please take a moment to complete it. It's an important tool that helps us shape future educational programs and better serve upcoming audiences. We will submit for CEUs to the licensing agencies on Friday. So make sure you finalize your CEU payments by the end of day today if you would like CEU credits for your attendance today. This is part of a monthly webinar series that is held on the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be April 14th with guest speaker Dr. Brian Unruh, who will present on the topic of next generation landscape industry, robotics, automation, and AI in action. So please mark your calendars. We're thrilled to have you join us today for our webinar on the topic of salt-tolerant plants for Florida, presented by Ryan Czaplewski. Ryan is the commercial horticulture agent in the interim county extension director in Collier County. His extension program offers green industry professional development classes in areas to include pesticide training, plant propagation, salinity management, and implementation of best management practices. Prior to working with Extension, Ryan has worked in the green industries for over 13 years managing golf course, turfgrass, and landscape plants. He has a master's in soil science from the University of Florida. So please, everyone, welcome Ryan Czaplewski.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Ryan Czaplewski, and so today's topic is salt-tolerant plants for Florida. And so I know I'm based in Collier, so the folks in the chat here that are from Lee and Collier know very well, and really the state of Florida as a whole know, during our hurricanes that we get, typically we get some salt spray. I know down in our neck of the woods, we had Idalia, Milton that brought some salt spray. We had some king tides. So if anybody doesn't know king tides, when that moon is at its closest to the earth, you may get an extra 2 feet or so of high tide that may get into areas that not otherwise would have. And when storms sort of work with that, we may get flooding in areas that don't always have it. And of course, during Hurricane Ian in Lee County, folks know very well that your homes may have been inundated. I have some pictures of golf courses there that were inundated. And so through all of this, we start to learn what could work in a landscape, what does work, and then, of course, what doesn't work, right? And so this picture here is that of a ficus tree. And so this is from Milton. We see that salt spray damage this tree to the point where we see tip burn. So some objectives we have for today. I don't want to go too much into what salinity is, but I think we do need to talk about it just a bit before we figure out what plants could work for that plant palette in areas that have salt spray and inundations. So hopefully we can understand what tests are available for salinity, how to interpret them when we get those results back, be able to describe really how salt affects plants both in the soil and through those leaf tissues, and then understanding what plants are available in Florida that are salt tolerant that we can choose from. So here's a picture in Collier County. This is right along the coastline on the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, what a view, right? So when we define salt-tolerant plants, these are plants that can withstand really without having any significant adverse effects. Now, they can be moderate to high concentrations of salt salinity in the water that we're irrigating with. It could be on its leaves or in the soil nearby its roots. So think about soil solution, and they should be able to tolerate them. It doesn't mean that they will be without damage. It just means that they will be able to tolerate them and continue to live. And salinity, when we're looking for it, usually it's the concentration of dissolved salts that are in the soil or the water. We see those measurements when we get tests back in, say, parts per million. You might see it listed as electrical conductivity, where the result will be in decisiemens per meter, or it could be dissolved salts. Now, here's just a snippet from the soil test. So if you do a soil producer test and you're trying to figure out, do I have salts in my soils? This would be sort of the test you would look for. And then University of Florida Extension also has one for irrigation water. If you're wondering, does my irrigation water have any salts in it? What you'll get back is some information about the electrical conductivity of that water, what the pH may be, some of these carbonates, and we'll discuss that. So typically when they're measuring, you're using tools like refractometers, so light refracting. So the more the light bends in the water, the higher the salinity would be, because they're going to cause some density increases and bend light just a bit more. You might also see conductivity meters like this one here on the right, where you have two probes that are in this, and so they're going to send an electric current in the water or in the soil medium. And usually when they do it in the soil, there's kind of a slurry here of soil and water. But in this case, when we're just trying to check irrigation water, we're going to go ahead and put this meter in here, see what the voltage is between these two electrodes. So the higher the voltage, that is an increase in salinity, because those dissolved salts increase the conductivity in the water. Okay. So what salts may be in question? Some of them, we figure sodium chloride. So when you think table salt, that's definitely one, right? But some others that show up are things like magnesium, calcium, potassium. I mean, these are what they call base cations that are usually used for plant nutrients. They can also be held onto the soil colloids or on the exchange sites of the soil itself. Now, these don't typically increase pH or decrease it in a sense. They may increase it a little, but they're not going to decrease it like aluminum would. But these can also, when they're in high concentrations, think of your bag of fertilizer when you're putting out something like potassium chloride, right? And you're putting salts in the soil or potassium sulfate, same thing here. And so when we have a high increase of these salts in our soils, we have a chance of having some salinity issues. So sources of salinity, so this is a picture from Lee County. If you can believe it, there's a golf course underneath this, about 6 feet under this water that has white caps. It's now the Gulf of Mexico, or that's the Gulf here. So coastal influences, you may see storm surge be part of that source of salinity, right? And so when the storm water comes up from a hurricane, this can bring in that salt water, and that can go into your irrigation ponds when you're trying to irrigate with. That can go into the soil profile. Of course, that affects those plants that are there to begin with. As we saw in Milton and Dahlia, right, we saw those salt sprays and how that affected our plants. So irrigation water quality can also be a part of it, right? So if you have reclaimed water that you're irrigating your community with, that reclaimed water does have some soluble salts in it. And so just aside from the nitrogen and phosphorus, it also contains that salts, as you begin to irrigate, will build up in your soil profile. The irrigation water quality, especially if you're pulling from an aquifer, say that aquifer is near the coastline, it may have some saltwater intrusion in it. We may have that being a factor too, and why we have salinity issues in our soils. Fertilizer accumulation, and hopefully this doesn't happen in your community. This is a picture of an HOA where the landscaper had a impeller that was no longer spinning, and so you can see these burn lines in the turf grass, right? And so if you have fertilizer accumulation, whether you're putting out fertilizer consistently or over fertilizing, you may have salts begin to build up in your soils. Or in this case, if the fertilizer is being dumped in an area not being spread in its proper swath width, from the fertilizer spreader, we may have an overaccumulation of those salts that could cause burn to turfgrass in this case. What about poor drainage, right? Poor drainage can be a part in this as well. If we're not draining the water and we're irrigating, especially during this dry time of the year, we're irrigating. Say there's some salinity in that irrigation water. Well, we're not getting any rainwater to help flush those salts or push the salts past the root zone of our plants. Those salts begin to build up in the soil profile near the roots of the plants. And so if you have poor drainage conditions, what we may see is that we're not able to properly push those salts past the root zone, and so they end up accumulating, and the plant may respond to that damage. So how does salt affect the plant? Primarily osmotic stress, right? So if we think back to some of the things we learned in, say, high school and college, when you have excess salts outside of the root zones, it's harder for the plant to take up water, right? And so if we have a reduction in water, we're going to see some of those adverse effects of the plant stress as if it doesn't have water. That can cause some cellular dehydration where the plant may be wilting. We may see that the stomata are not opening and closing as they should and kind of closing up. We may see also that we have some issues with chlorophyll production or the plant going through photosynthesis and not really being able to utilize or make that ATP to go through photosynthesis, get the carbohydrates it needs and continue to move forward. We may see that the plant's sort of stuck in a sense where it cannot no longer go through its normal processes. And it can also cause some issues with soil structure. So our soils, if there's an excess of sodium in the profile, calcium can possibly get bumped off of the soil profile, potassium especially. So the soluble nutrients that are available to the plant end up being a lot of sodium. And so we end up losing some potassium, we may lose some magnesium. In that case, it may be needed where we need to go in and use something like gypsum to get sodium out. But primarily, we'll talk about some of the mitigation of how to get salts out of the profile later. All right, so what we all came for, we're talking about plants, right? And so what do we see after hurricanes or we have salt spray or say irrigation water has some salinity in it? When it hits the leaf tissue, we're going to see that leaf burn like we see here with this Hong Kong orchid. We see that the leaf's kind of burning. We don't have that same chlorophyll, the green color that we're normally used to seeing. If you look at some of the newest growth, you see that it looks stunted. In fact, it's even lost those leaves. We may see some chlorosis. That could be an indicator that you have some salt damage. So here's firebush that was damaged in Lee County. So you may see that you have a plant that should be able to sustain some salt tolerance, but when you get excess salts from salt spray that accumulate, we still may see some premature leaf drop, but the plant may still continue to survive. We'll see, of course, reduced flowering and possibly root damage. So there was a study done over in the United Arab Emirates University. So they had done this on willow. And so you can kind of see the progression from left to right of an increased amount of sodium in the soil. And so they were looking at the root mass and the amount of root hairs that were on this plant. So you saw as the concentrations continue to go up on the bottom x-axis there, you see that the trend line of overall root number, root length, and those root hairs begin to drop off with increasing sodium. So in this case, that when we talk about right plant, right place, right, we're in an area where we have some inundation, where we have more salinity issues than we had before. It may be better to choose a plant that's tolerant of high salinity in those cases. So what constitutes that saline conditions? Say you get that irrigation test back and you're looking at it going, all right, so how do I know, do I have high salinity or could this have any effect on my plants? We're gonna look at a few different numbers. You'll have some data that'll have information on the EC, or electrical conductivity. It'll be listed in decisiemens per meter. So if we see that it's above 0.75, if we have plants that are not tolerant to salt, we would see some adverse effects. Same with total dissolved salt, which is TDS. They're measured in parts per million. If we see numbers above 480, we may also, same thing, if we have plants that are not tolerant to salt conditions, we would see some damage being had as well. SAR is the sodium absorption rate, and this is, say, the amount of sodium that's in there. Then they find this by taking sodium, they divide that by the total amount of like calcium and magnesium. This is all square under the square root. And so if it's above 6 in irrigation water, you could have a potential to increase sodium in the profile. And when you have excess sodium in the profile, you end up losing some of that soil structure, so the ability for water to flow through, the ability for nutrients to kind of be available to the plant. When soil structure gets lost, we start to lose the ability to leach salt as well, right? And so drainage may be lost. So when we see these numbers, we may need to find, say, possibly new or cleaner water source, or maybe amend the water source that we do have. But when it comes to soil conditions in a saline, you get that soil test back. You do a soil producer test, or any soil lab that will do EC. You may see that anything above 4 decisiemens per meter, we would consider these saline soils. Now, those that are not salt tolerant plants, they would have an issue going above 2 decisiemens per meter. But these high salt tolerant plants may end up going from 4 to 8 decisiemens per meter in the soil. They may be able to survive in that. Now, if you do a soil test and you find that the sodium absorption ratio, again, is over 13, we would consider these sodic soils or high sodium soils. Again, think loss of structure, loss of drainage. So we would we'd have to look to amend that with something like gypsum, or if you're in maybe a part of the country or the part of the state that has lower pH, you could use something like lime, but maybe that's a topic for another day. But again, if you have very high saline soils, you may even see that white crust forming on the soil surface. Okay, so just recap some of those things. You may see electrical conductivity meters, you use soil tests, those laboratory analysis. You can always just check visually too. Do I think I have a salinity issue? And then go ahead and follow up with some sort of lab analysis, maybe through tissue testing as well. So we did do that these are pictures from Stephen Brown. So Stephen Brown, myself, and Ralph Mitchell, along from Charlotte to Collier, we were looking at the same issue. We saw the salt sprays from Milton come through, and we were trying to see, we have plants that are salt tolerant that are showing some damage. So here on the top left, we have, this is sea grape. The right over here, this is green buttonwood. Both of these are high salt tolerant plants. And so you could see 3 different leaves. On the sea grape picture, if you look at the leaf on the far right there of the sea grape, you see that this leaf looks good. So during Milton, we saw that when the salt spray came in, it was southwest to west-facing sides of the plants that were showing this damage. So we took samples from the side of the plant that didn't see the salt spray, some that showed some symptoms, and then the side that took the brunt of that salt spray, right? And so we also did the same for ficus trees, as well as 7-year apples. So what we got from the results was, say, sea grape, the side that wasn't affected, and these are expressed in milligrams per liter of sodium. We see that the side that didn't get all the salt spray had much less, right? You could see much less, from 2,000 milligrams per liter to the side that had complete necrosis or saw a lot of that damage at 29,000 milligrams per liter. So it kind of just goes to show, when we're looking at salt tolerance, to understand that you may still see some damage, but the plant should be able to recover when we're looking at high salt tolerance, okay? All right, so let's look at some plants that can work. So we're going to start with large trees and kind of funnel our way down to ground covers, even falling in the turfgrass world, to see what works in these areas of salinity, whether that's from storm surge or even salt spray. And a majority of them, if they're able to take storm surge, they're also usually able to take salt spray, but we'll go through each one. So we'll start with red-based cedar. Now, we don't have a lot of it down south, but we do have some. You may see it in these USDA zones. It can handle anywhere from 7B to 11. It does have a high salt tolerance. The drought tolerance is also high on it. And those leaves, I like them. They're simple, kind of lanceolate, very small leaves on them. They're quick to grow. They do have that issue with laurel wilt disease, so that can be a problem to watch and monitor for. They like full sun to parched shade. and they can be a big tree. So anywhere from 30 to 50 feet tall, just as wide spreading. And they're an evergreen, so you don't really have to worry about the leaves dropping as much. Now down here, gumbo limbo is one of those trees that also has high salt tolerance, but when folks are looking for something that will maintain leaves, this may possibly be better suited for that characteristic. It does have some flowers. They're generally inconspicuous, kind of green color, but the fruit they produce is, half an inch large, blue fruit that typically attracts those squirrels and birds. Green buttonwood. Now, you saw those pictures of the green buttonwood. You saw some of that damage from the necrosis from salt spray from Milton, but they are still considered a high salt tolerant plant, both in the inundation and from salt spray. Now, the USDA zone on them, I've seen it's about 10 to 11, 10B, probably more comfortable, right? They have more of a simple pinnate leaf shape. They're very fast growing. They work well, like in this picture here by Stephen Brown, right in medians. So you can put them in areas that maybe oak trees couldn't possibly or could have an issue with, right? They have more of a vase shape than that red base cedar with more of its umbrella shaped growth pattern, right? But this can be about 30 to 40 feet tall, can get about 20 to 30 feet wide. It's going to maintain its leaf persistence, so it is evergreen. Now, it does have male and female trees, but it will do well in full sun to part shade. It also has flowers, rather inconspicuous, but I do like the fruit that it does produce. It does attract a lot of wildlife, so that's a nice benefit to the Conocarpus erectus green buttonwood. Silver buttonwood, just like green buttonwood, has that same salt tolerance. You may still see damage from the salt spray and from the inundation, but it should be able to make its way through as well. USDA zone, much the same, still in that 10, 10B to 11 category. It's going to like to be in the full sun. It can handle some part shade. You can grow it as a tree. You can grow them as shrubs as well. They're fast growing. Those dimensions, a bit smaller than our green buttonwood, right? So instead of as large as green buttonwood can get, this is more in that 15 to 20 feet tall and wide category. It will maintain its leaf. I do like the fact that it has some color to it, right? So you can add some accent to your landscapes with green buttonwood. Instead of having just maybe some green foliage, you can add in some of that silver green color that it produces. Also produces some fruit as well, or berries, right, for wildlife, dioecious, and really flowers year round. Flowers are inconspicuous, but the berries are there for wildlife. Okay, sea grape. Now, the Coco loba sea grape, it can be a very large tree. We see it on the coastal areas and some of the dunes, on the edges of the dunes into kind of the urban areas. You see it sometimes as more of a large kind of hedge-like tree. It can be a hedge. Sometimes, like in this picture here by our residential agent, you can see how you can shape it into a nice forming tree as well with a strong central leader if you so choose. 10 to 11, again, is kind of its USDA hardiness zone. So, getting higher up into the state can be a bit tricky on this tree. It may not do well. It has a very high salt tolerance, as we saw. Still may get some damage on its leaves from salt spray, but it will rebound out. Has a high drought tolerance, so once they're established, there's not a whole lot of watering needs that need to be had with this plant. Now, the leaves, some really love it, some folks don't. Has more of a simple leaf, that orbiculate leaf shape, kind of oval leaf shape. So, but it is fast growing. It does produce fruit as well. So again, good attractant for wildlife into a garden or into a landscape. Flowers more in the winter. The flowers are fairly inconspicuous. They're very small, right? So they have a nice sweet smell to them. So it's another little benefit to having sea grape in the environment. Live oak also fits the bill too, as we'll see. Here's a picture of one of the leaves. So this is after Hurricane Milton as well. I'm not sure what I got on my finger there from painting with my kid, but I'm not sure anyhow. You can see from the leaves, you see the same damage that we saw from the sea grape, that we saw from the green buttonwood as well, where we see that tinge on the leaves. Now, this tree in particular, it dropped some of those leaves, but then it put on new growth shortly after that. The live oaks, the Quercus virginiana, can get to be about 7B to 10B in terms of USDA zones. So as you're further up in the state, this could be the right plant for maybe your garden or the community. That salt tolerance is considered high. The drought tolerance is high as well. So once they establish, there's not a whole lot of watering needs to be done. You will need to trim these trees. They can develop some branching that can kind of go back and forth between, like we see in this picture at our parking lot. The leaf shapes are simple and orbiculate, more lanceolate than anything. They're very fast growing. It can be about 25 to 30 feet tall and just about as wide, evergreen, and they do have some flowers, again, very inconspicuous, but a great tree to have in, say, an area where you're looking for some shade and to reduce some of those heat islands that you may encounter in landscapes in urban areas. All right, so now we'll get to a little smaller. We'll go from the large trees. We'll get down to some of the smaller trees that you may see, some hedges that can work. So this picture here, this is along Logan Extension, if anybody's familiar to Collier County. So we got to see some of the damage right away. Some plants didn't show the damage quite as fast as others, but typically, again, we saw that same salt spray along that west-southwest facing side of plants. And so that's important. So when we're looking at different trees that can work in areas, so orange Geiger, I know, again, this is more South Florida, but this is, again, 10B to 11, but its salt tolerance is also very high. We saw the same with orange Geiger. If that salt spray or inundation came in, we would lose leaves, but it would put leaves right back on shortly after those issues. The drought tolerance is also considered high on these plants. The leaves are simple and cordate or heart-shaped almost. They are fairly rough. They do have one issue in terms of the Geiger beetle that you may have to manage in your landscape and watch out for and scout. But you can manage that fairly easily using some proper pruning practices, as well as if you need to go through your full steps of IPM, go through all those as well. The growth rate is a little bit slower than some of our others, so it may take longer for it to reach its full size at 25 to 30 feet and about as wide. They do have evergreen leaves, so they're not going to fall during the winter. They will stay on. Now, it is good to note that they do like full sun, so if you have them in areas that have some shade, you might notice that they don't quite get as wide. They like to grow upwards and try to find the light. So if you're looking for something that's more of a statement tree, this could fit the bill, but give it some space and give it some sunlight. They are monoecious, so they have male and female on the same plant, and you will see summer flowering for the most part, and those flowers are gorgeous. They have an orange color to them, and again, they can be a nice accent plant. We also see them being used in medians as well, or in replacement for areas that may have had some trouble with fitting oak trees in very narrow areas, or issues like that may arise. Orange Geiger can kind of fit in those more narrow medians between, say, a street and a sidewalk. So Yaupon holly also is high salt tolerance. So Ilex vomitoria, it goes from 7A to 9B. It has very high salt tolerance. The drought tolerance, it can be medium. It does need some water to get established, and it may need some water. It's kind of along the area where it does need some compared to most that we've seen before. Those leaves are simple, ovate, but you're looking for the berries, right? The berries are what a lot of people really like about them. They're dioecious. So you do need to plant a male and female tree if you're looking to get these red berries that attract wildlife. They are evergreens, so we don't typically lose the leaves throughout the year, and then they'll typically flower right around that springtime. Yeah. So this is getting back more to the South Florida area. Jamaican caper is one that we saw good results with too when it came to inundation, as well as the salt spray. So it does have a high salt tolerance. It is 10 to 11 in terms of USDA zone. The drought tolerance is medium to high, but once you get it established, it is very good drought tolerance. The leaves are something to have in the landscape. It has some different color to them, a very vibrant green. top part of the leaf, and then the bottom is sort of a silver, has a silver sheen to it. It is a slow grower, so if you're looking to get a tree that is 15 feet tall, it may take some time for it to reach that. It'll get about 8 to 12 feet wide. We see it grown as a shrub, but it also can be a small tree. And it's evergreen, so it won't lose its leaves. When it does flower, it's a great flower to have in the landscape. They're very long stamens on these flowers. You'll see them in white, sometimes in a purplish color, typically more white, but it's a nice little tree or hedge to have in the landscape when you're looking for some salt tolerance. Sweet acacia works as well. This is ours at our office. They can be a small tree, being anywhere from 15 to 25 feet, about 15 to 25 feet wide. They have great drought tolerance. One big issue is if you have a lot of kids in a landscape, this might not be the tree for you. It does have thorns along its branches, so that is something to be cognizant of. It is bipinnately compound leaves, so if you're thinking you want some different leaf textures in the landscape, this might work if you're looking for something similar to, say, Royal Point Sienna in terms of leaf shape, but a little bit smaller than that. It's semi-evergreen in the sense that if it goes through periods of high drought, some different changes of temperature, it gets too cold, gets too warm, it may start to lose some of those leaves. So it may not keep leaves year-round. Those flowers are about the size of a dime to a nickel, somewhere in that size. That gives you some size definition, but it does flower year-round. Wax myrtle, we're seeing this used in South Florida a bit more for hedges than in the past. And wax myrtle can go from 7B to 11 in those USDA zones. It does have a very high salt tolerance, so it can get inundated. It can receive some salt spray and still, again, it may lose leaves, but it will generally come back. It does have a medium drought tolerance, so it will need a little bit more water than, say, something like a cocoa plum. Those leaves are simple, they're oblong, kind of oblanceolate, so they have a nice little sheen to them. They're green in color. They typically flower in the spring, and they're dioecious, so you'll have male and female wax myrtles. Florida privet, this is more 8B to 11. Again, another high salt tolerant plant. It can take some inundation, salt spray, and still thrive. It may lose some leaves, just like the rest. Will generally come back. Has a high drought tolerance. Those leaf types are simple, kind of oblong leaves, and they grow very quickly. So they're a fast grower in the landscape. They don't get too tall though. So you're looking at 10 to 15 feet, anywhere from 5 to 10 feet wide. Oftentimes they can be used as a tree. Oftentimes used as hedge. You can use them as screenings. They do attract butterflies as well, which is kind of a nice little addition. But they are dioecious as well. Semi-evergreen, so very similar. When we go through high drought or issues with temperature changes, you may lose some leaves during the process. Those berries that they do produce are kind of a dark blue to blackish color, and you'll attract birds throughout the summer after they're done flowering. All right, palm trees, as we saw from that picture where we had to kind of think about where a golf course could be under those white caps from the golf. We found that some trees are fairly salt tolerant, right? Some of these palms, and one is the Perotis palm, or sometimes often referred to as the Everglades palm. This is a palm tree that is native, right? So the USDA zone can be 9B to 11. Salt tolerance is, medium to high. It can be definitely high in some sense. Medium in the sense where if it's inundated for too long, it may have some issues rebounding back. Drought tolerance is fairly well. It does need some water, but it does have a very slow growth pattern. So think of it in terms of, say, thatch palm, in terms of slow, maybe a little faster than thatch, but it will eventually get to be about 30 feet tall. It will keep its leaves, of course, like any palm. It will be evergreen, and it will flower in the spring and winter. And what you'll get in the end are these kind of goldish berries in the landscape. Now, if you, just like any palm, if you would like to trim the berries off, you can. That's perfectly fine. All right, sable palm. So from that picture on the golf course where we saw the white caps on the water, sable palms were in that landscape. all those sabal palms, for the most part, survived that inundation and that storm. So I would list this more on that medium to high, especially on high end. We have a USDA zone being an 8B to 11. The drought tolerance is also good. It is somewhat slow, a little faster than some of the other palms that we see. It does get 30 feet. This is a native palm. And again, very similar in terms of the flowering. Now, this can be a pollinator for bees, especially during times where we may not have as many plants blooming. Sabal palms can fit for those folks that are beekeepers. Salt palmettos, this is again another native, right? Serona ripens. Serona ripens is a USDA zone 8 to 11. You see high salt tolerance with this. On that golf course, there was salt palmettos as well, completely inundated. That golf course did not lose any of those salt palmettos. It does have high drought tolerance. It is a slow grower, so we're not looking for this to be very large. It's kind of 5 to 10 feet tall, 10 being kind of maximum for that. We aren't going to lose leaves as well, just like any other palm, but they will flower in the spring, and then we'll get those salt palmetto berries that will be kind of a green in color to start, and then turn into black that many of our mammals in the area, whether that's bears, enjoy, birds enjoy as well. And then last but not least, Buccaneer palm. So Buccaneer palm is another one that can sustain some salt and still thrive. It has high salt tolerance, both in terms of spray as well as inundation. It has high drought tolerance. Now, USDA zone is more 10 to 11, so it may not be able to go as far north as the sable or the salt palmetto. It is also a slow grower. Dimensions, you're looking at 10 to 25 feet in terms of height, but if you're looking for a self-shedding, salt-tolerant palm, this might be the palm for you. And it does produce these green berries that you, again, if you would like to trim them off, you could. Okay, now we'll get to the flowering plants and some of the ornamental grasses that work as well. Now, the first one, of course, it is a wildflower, so Gaillardia, just as it's usual, it'll live for a bit, it may die off and then come back, self-seed, right? So the USDA zone on this can be as high as 3 to 11. So pretty much the whole state of Florida, we're okay to use Gaillardia. Salt tolerance is high, drought tolerance is high, but again, you will have it die off, it self-seed, and then come back. Nice red color in the landscape when you're looking for it. Good pollinator plant as well. Typically only going to get about 1 to 2 feet in height, maybe a 2 to 3 foot spread in terms of the entire plant, and you'll have that flowering from summer through fall. Crown of thorns is another one that works as well in terms of its salt tolerance. In some cases where it's inundated for a long period of time, we saw that some of it died off, but it did come back as well in some areas, so sort of in the medium to high tolerance. USDA zone in that 9B to 11 with high drought tolerance, and those leaves being more succulent, so it'll have the leaves, and then those leaves will kind of fall off. It does have those very little thorns on it. As well, it is a slow grower, so typically in that 2 to 5 foot in terms of height, 3 to 5 feet in terms of how wide it will typically expand. And you will have flowers year-round, more reddish in color. Bougainvillea, many of these species are, of course, drought tolerant, but they do have some pretty good salt tolerance as well. So that 9B to 11 category as well in the USDA zone. They will be evergreens, so you will have greenery all year round, and as well as flowering all year round. They grow quickly, which is nice. They do have thorns as well, so be cognizant of that when you're installing them in the landscape. But if you're looking for some color in a salt-tolerant landscape, Bougainvillea works as well. Beach verbena down here in Collier in the USDA 10 to 11 zone, beach verbena has some salt tolerance. It's not quite as high as some of the others we saw. But it does have great drought tolerance. Grows about 1 foot tall, can be about 3 to 5 feet wide. It flowers year round, so it's a nice little change in color in the scenery, more of a purplish color to that flower with the simple ovate type leaves. And it is evergreen, so we don't have to worry, of course, leaves dropping off. It does provide a little bit of change in color in the scenery. This picture is also from, these are dune sunflowers. This is in Marco Island. So dune sunflowers can go as far in terms of the USDA zone as 8B, kind of falling into that 11 category. They do have a high salt tolerance. They can be grown in areas that are kind of near the dunes, hence some of the common name to it. It is a simple leaf, kind of deltoidy shape, kind of triangular shaped if you look at the leaf. It has a nice yellow color to it. It is semi-evergreen as well, so it will kind of die off or lose some of those leaves in those periods of when it's very cold or high drought. And it's only about 2 to 4 feet tall, 2 to 4 feet wide. It can kind of expand outward in size, and it flowers year round. And it's a very fast grower as well for the landscape. So again, another kind of changing color for a scenery where you may be looking for some color. And then of course, Muhlenbergia, muley grass, USDA zone 7 to 11. This shows high salt tolerance as well. And drought tolerance, of course, is high. Now flowering, we're kind of coming to the end of its flowering time. We're thinking right around in the fall, so September onward, you may get some of that inflorescence that you typically see that can be kind of that pinkish hue in the landscape, can add some contrast, and it's a slow grower, but it's a great plant to have in the landscape as well, and it's a native. Sand cordgrass, so thinking back to that picture we saw in the beginning of that Naples home on the waterfront, they planted several of the sand cordgrass along their edge of their dune restoration area. So Spartina bakery, also a USDA 8 to 11 zone, high salt tolerance to it. It does have a high drought tolerance as well. It is a slow grower, but when it does get to be quite large, it can be 3 to 4 feet tall, kind of 18 to 20 feet wide. So it does have some spread. You may have to trim it back if you have it in the landscape. Give it some space. It'll fill in very well. And then it leads to some of the ground covers. So this is a picture after Hurricane Ian. The floodwaters went through. Where the canoe came from was still up for debate. But as you see, some of this sable palm actually thrived through. And the turf grass, which is Bermuda in the foreground here, had survived as well, being inundated. And we'll talk about that one, but railroad vine is one. Of course, you see these along dune restoration projects. It was also in that picture at that Naples waterfront home. And that can go to about a USD zone 9A to about 12. The salt tolerance is high, and once it is established, has a very high drought tolerance as well. These purple flowers are excellent, right? They don't last all that long. They typically only last for a day. They open during sunrise, and they'll close up kind of early afternoon, kind of end of the day. But they are kind of a nice feature in the landscape. Now, those runners can be quite long. They can grow as far as 100 feet. So this is one you would definitely want to give it space, maybe more apt for dune restoration, but along those edges, like we saw in that Naples home, maybe that could be a good spot to be installing railroad vine along the side of a kind of a dune area. It can be about 6 inches tall, 16 inches, maybe pushing it, but it does flower year round. Natal plum, Carissa macrocarpa, it does actually well just as the others. The high salt tolerance, it can get inundated. It can take salt spray and it can come out of there. It will lose some leaves, but it will put them right back on afterwards. A USDA zone being right around about 9B to 11. Simple leaves, as you can see here, they're not very large, but the whole natal plum can be about 1 to 2 feet tall, can get a little taller than that, 4 to 8 feet in spreading, and it will keep its leaves year round. It does have some thorns to them, so again, there's children in the area, be cognizant of that when installing these in the landscape. They do produce flowers, typically during the summer, with a fruit that can start as green and turn red, as you see in the picture, and they have kind of a nice sweet smell to them. Perennial peanut, we see these being installed in more medians in the Collier County area, as well as Lee, as we've seen down south and throughout Florida. It can grow in those USDA zones 8 to 11. It does have a high salt tolerance when it comes to the salt spray. Inundation, depending on how long it stays inundated, it can come back as well. Drought tolerance is very high once it is established. And the leaves are compound, which I always find a nice little interesting feature about them. So if you're looking for kind of alternative to turf grass, you can install some of these perennial peanuts. Now, they can be about 3 to 18 inches in height, but most of the varieties that we use as turf replacements sit in that 3 to 8 inches tall range, but they can spread about 8 to 9 feet in width, so give them some space as well. Flowering typically in that spring through early winter stage with those yellow flowers that we know. And they will be evergreens, so you don't usually lose those leaves. St. Augustine grass and some of these that we'll talk about quickly, the turf grasses and our warm season turf grasses do fairly well when it comes to salt tolerance. We know seashore paspalum, which is one of the ones listed, we know that has great salt tolerance. We also saw that St. Augustine did fairly well, just as well as Bermuda. And so we consider this to have a high salt tolerance, both in terms of spray and inundation. In the case of that golf course in Lee County, it didn't lose much in the way of turf grass in those areas on the Bermuda, as well as the lots along the houses of St. Augustine. Now, just as any turf grass, if it stays wet for too long, you may have issues with root rots that could form, right? So take all root rot could set in. So we do have to be cognizant of that. The drought tolerance is fairly medium on St. Augustine. It grows fairly quickly. Typically want to mow it about 4 inches in height. It will get taller if you let it. About 4 inches in height is fine. Bermuda grass, a lot of different cultivars of Bermuda grass. It can go up to roughly 7 in terms of USDA zone. You may have a lot of winter dormancy at that neck of the woods. You may have a cold winter. You could have some death, so maybe more in that 8 to 11, but it could go as high as 7. Of course, it has high salt tolerance as well in terms of both spray and inundation, and actually fairly high drought tolerance too. It does grow much quicker in terms of spreading than some of the St. Augustine or zoysia grasses, and likes to be mowed at about 2 inches in height. Zoysia grass did well, just as well as Bermuda, a little less, but just about. The salt tolerance is also considered high, 7 to 11 in that USDA zone. Typically mowed at 2.5 inches. Of course, it'll get taller if you let it, but that's kind of the IFAS recommendation on its height. It will spread fast, not as fast as Bermuda, but it can take more shade than Bermuda grass. So same thing, right plant, right place. It still has to be the right turf grass or the right plant for the location that it's being installed. And then last of the ground covers and of turf grass, of course, seashore paspalum. It has a lot of different disease issues with it, so we don't see it often used in residential landscapes as much as the others. USDA zone, very similar in that 8 to 11, but it has the highest salt tolerance of the bunch in terms of Bermuda grass, zoysia, or St. Augustine. Bahia grass doesn't have quite the same salt tolerance as the others. Carpet grass or centipede, much the same, doesn't have the same salt tolerance as some of the seashore paspalums in Bermuda, but it does grow fairly quick. So what do we do if we have some salinity issues? So when it comes to soils, we want to get any debris that's left over out of there. So if we are inundated by a hurricane or maybe some of those king tides, remove the debris that may have absorbed some of those salts and salt water. We get that out of there. We can also bring more light to ground covers or some of the lower growing shrubs that we have in the environment. Leach salts out is kind of the name of the game when it comes to getting salts out of the profile. So you want to use the cleanest water source that you have, and you're going to try to water, but not to the point where you have sheet flow or runoff in the area. You still want to have the water percolate through the soil. So put it out at a rate that it's still going to percolate through. It may be several attempts of using clean water to help flush some of those salts out of the root zone, but in time it will work. But if the landscape is prone to salinity issues, we may need to start looking at choosing some different plants or maybe installing some more salt tolerant plants in the landscape. That is definitely a practice we've seen in Collier County along the Gulf, so that can happen as well. Now, if you have salt spray on the tissue of the leaves, now just like any nutrient, when you have nutrients sprayed on the leaf, they will be absorbed through the cuticle of the leaf. So if you're able to get out there, you can try to wash some of it off, but if it's been a few hours, there's a good chance a lot of those salts have made their way past the cuticle. But remember, plant the right place. It's very tough to, after the fact, try to make a non-salt tolerant landscape salt tolerant. If you can kind of get ahead of it, that can definitely help in these terms of salinity mitigation. So there's a bunch of resources that are available, plenty of salt tolerant plant articles by IFAS FFL team, as well as many of the different counties. So if you're looking for some that work in your landscape, and I didn't have a lot of good ones for you, that's okay. There's definitely more out there now. This one that I listed from the Florida Plant Horticulture Society, it's from the 70s. So anytime you're looking through plant palettes of those that are salt tolerant plants, it's a good thing to also review what could be now considered invasive, or and weed those out so we're not accidentally installing some invasive plants in the landscape. And then I know these links will be available, but of course that FFL plant guidebook is always a good one. And then there's two different soil tests. There's the soil producer test that works, as well as the irrigation water test, when you're just trying to get an idea of salinity issues or baselines that you may have prior to, say, a hurricane event, and then where you may fall after. That's always a good practice as well. So I know I went fairly quick. There's definitely some salt tolerant plants we didn't talk about that we saw. So things like hibiscus, firebush, we saw Clusia, just from some anecdotal evidence, they did well. Cocoa plum, unless it was inundated for a long time, did well for the most part, but if it was inundated for quite some time, we saw some issues with that. But there's plenty out there, so I didn't name them all. So utilize resources, and I'll open up to questions.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for a wonderful presentation on salt tolerant plants in Florida. We still have time for just a couple questions. One of the first ones reads, are there any signs of salt damage that are particular or specific for damage caused by salt in the air or salts in soils? Since the visual damage have similar appearances for herbicide damage and drought or drying out.
Yeah, so with some of the salt spray, especially what we observed down in Collier, Lee, and Charlotte as well, is we saw that after the hurricane came through, kind of swept our area, and we saw the salt spray, it was pretty quick that you could see the damage to the tissue. Now, usually right after the storm, the tissue damage can be pretty quick, absorbs through the cuticle at a fast rate. But through the soil, you will start to see, as the soil salts build up, you'll see that damage progressing at a sort of a slower pace. So it'll come on and still damage the plant, but at a kind of a slower pace. So it won't be, 2 days after a hurricane that the salt water will immediately have impact. It may be sort of delayed in terms of that, maybe up to a week, but the salt spray would be fairly immediate. At least that's what we saw down in Collier and Lee.
Thank you, Ryan. We have a question here from Caesar. Have you observed landscapes affected with salt provided by reclaimed irrigation systems?
Yes, actually. So, and I see it a bit more, say, even for some of the high salt tolerant, like some Bermuda grass. So golf courses down in this neck of the woods tend to usually have reclaimed water. So I see it a little bit more, plus they're kind of the stakeholders that I see quite a bit. And so as those salts, especially during the dry time of the year, as you're putting out reclaimed water, there is some salts in the reclaimed water. So during the dry time of the year, when you have evaporation still occurring, so in the fall into the early spring, when we don't get a lot of those rains, we have a lot of evaporation. There is transpiration occurring on the plant. And so we're continuing to water with reclaimed water. So the water may get lost to the atmosphere or taken up by the plants, and what remains can be a lot of salt. So the salt begins to build up, and then we start to see during that dry time, not only it looks like drought issues, but it could also be exacerbated by that salt issue. I have a number of nurseries that'll send in samples for some media, their plant media, and they'll see that during the times of drought, when they're relying only on irrigation, they may see electrical conductivity go from below 1 to near 3 or 4 and start to borderline those saline conditions. So, which may not be an issue when you're growing some salt tolerant plants, but when you're growing something that's more cut flowers or annual plants that are a little more prone to salt issues, and you have plant media that builds up, then with salts, then that issue really becomes a problem to try to sell those plants to the market.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It is now 11 o'clock, so we are out of time. So please refer to Ryan's email presented right in front of you if you have additional questions. And we do have a question pertaining to if this webinar is being recorded. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our FFL webinars page. Please allow a few weeks in order to see this recorded webinar posted. But otherwise, thank you all so much for your attendance today. And thank you, Ryan, for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Yeah, everyone enjoy the rest of your day.